In the heart of the Missouri Ozarks, there exists a place the maps refuse to name, a hollow so remote that even the locals speak of it in whispers. In the summer of 1921, a family known only as the Hollow Clan disappeared from that place. Entirely. No trace, no footprints, no letters, no hints as to where they went or what they left behind. Every effort to uncover the truth ended in silence. Even the rangers sent to investigate returned empty-handed, and some never returned at all. What happened to them? What shadow passed through that hollow, leaving behind only questions that have never been answered? The journals they kept vanished. The cabins they built crumbled, as if swallowed by the earth. And yet, sometimes, if you stand just past the ridge and the fog settles over the trees, some swear they hear children laughing, though the hollow has been empty for over a century. The Ozarks are not forgiving. Their hills rise steep and jagged, carved by centuries of rain and time, their valleys cloaked in mist that never seems to fully lift. In 1921, the Hollow Clan made their home in one of these secluded hollows, a place so hidden it was known to only a few. Even today, the forest seems to hold its breath in that area, as if remembering something long forgotten. The trees grow thick and close together, their trunks darkened with moss, their roots twisting over rocks and into the earth like the veins of some ancient creature. The air carries a dampness that clings to your skin and smells faintly of decayed leaves and wet soil. When the wind passes through, it does not whistle. It sighs. It whispers through the hollows and the hollers, and for those who are sensitive, it almost sounds like voices, indistinct, fleeting, vanishing before they can be recognized. The paths in this part of the forest are not paths at all, but traces left by the weight of history. Branches bend at angles unnatural to the eye. Stones, slick with rain, seem to roll slightly underfoot, even when untouched. Birds avoid the deeper hollows. Only the quiet is left. And yet, in that quiet, small disturbances are impossible to ignore. A snap of a twig, a soft rustle of leaves where no wind blows, the faint scrape of something moving along the forest floor. The Hollow Clan built their cabins in these hills, each structure small and worn, the wood darkened by years of rain and smoke. Chimneys leaned at impossible angles, as if pulled by some unseen hand, and windows were often boarded haphazardly, not to keep people out, but perhaps to keep something in. Around the homes, gardens were overgrown, fences broken and half buried in mud. Yet remnants of life remained. A child's shoe, a spoon in the dirt, a patch of cloth caught in a bush, frozen in place, untouched since that summer when the family disappeared. The locals of the nearby valleys spoke little of the Hollow Clan. They would glance toward the hills with averted eyes, speaking of strange sounds, lights at night, and the feeling of being watched. But most of these stories were passed down quietly, from one generation to the next, never written, never recorded, as if naming them aloud might summon what had been lost. It was into this world of forgotten trees, broken homes, and murmuring hollows that those who sought the Hollow Clan in 1921 ventured, unaware that the forest itself seemed to resist their intrusion. To stand in that hollow is to feel the weight of absence. Every sound is magnified, the drop of water from a leaf, the distant call of an owl, the faint sigh of the wind over the hills. And yet, beneath it all, there is a vibration, a subtle hum almost imperceptible, as if the ground itself remembers. The Hollow Clan vanished into that silence, and long after, anyone who came searching reported the same sensation. The forest was alive in a way that should not have been possible, moving in rhythm with some unknown presence, watching, listening, waiting. As the sun fell behind the ridges of the Ozarks, shadows stretched unnaturally across the hollow. The trees no longer just loomed. They seemed to lean inward, as if pressing toward one another to conceal something hidden deep within. Every step taken by those who came searching for the Hollow clan became a cautious negotiation with the land itself. The ground soft, giving way beneath boots that had been confident just moments before. It began with the small things, a rock rolling down a slope, though no slope could explain its path. The flutter of a bird's wings, sudden and silent, so close it felt like a breath on the neck. A branch snapped behind a cabin, though no wind stirred, no creature approached. The men and women who dared to explore often spoke of a feeling, a prickling awareness that they were being observed. Not from afar, but close. Close enough to make the skin crawl, close enough to make them whisper to each other in fear, without daring to look back. One evening, a search party found remnants of the Hollow clan's lives scattered around the cabins. Personal items were there, yes. A bowl half buried in dirt, a pair of shoes in the grass. But they were out of place, almost as if moved. Footprints led up to the cabins and vanished suddenly, as though swallowed by the earth itself. The wind, which had been a soft accompaniment to their journey, began to carry sounds that were difficult to interpret. A shuffle, a thump, a low murmur that faded when one tried to focus. A young ranger, just 20 years old, swore he saw figures at the edge of the trees, standing motionless, pale in the dimming light. They did not move, did not blink, but their presence was undeniable. When he called out, the figures vanished, leaving no trace, no disturbance in the leaves, as if they had never been there. The men laughed nervously at first, dismissing the claim as fatigue. Yet the unease lingered. They could not shake the sense that something was watching, that each step into the hollow was being measured, considered, waited for. Night deepened, and with it, the sensations intensified. The searchers set up camp near the largest cabin, a structure that had survived time more stubbornly than the others. It sagged under its own age, the wood groaning faintly. But within its walls, the air felt wrong. Heavier, almost viscous, carrying the faint odor of smoke long extinguished, and something else. Something organic, decayed, but not entirely dead. One by one, the men noticed small signs. A chair slightly moved, a mat displaced on the floor, faint indentations in the dirt outside the door that did not match any boot. They began to speak in whispers, only half believing the evidence before their eyes. Then there were the sounds. They began subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if the forest itself had a rhythm, and the rhythm had shifted. A dragging, soft and measured, that seemed to circle the camp when no one moved. A whisper, never a word, but the tone unmistakable. Caution, warning, perhaps even hunger. The logs in the fire crackled unevenly, sending shadows across the forest that appeared to writhe, to reach outward like skeletal fingers. One of the rangers, a man who had never before shown fear, sat rigid, staring into the darkness where he was certain movement had passed. The others strained their eyes, but saw only the black of the trees, the dim flicker of fire, and a fog creeping in from the valley below. It is said that the deeper into the hollow they went, the more the familiar laws of the forest seemed suspended. Sounds became distorted, footsteps echoing where no one had walked. Shadows clung to corners and twisted in the light of lanterns, forming shapes that should not exist. And yet, when the lanterns were approached, the forms dissipated, One ranger, who had ventured slightly ahead of the group, screamed suddenly. The others ran to him, only to find him crouched, trembling, pointing at the ground. There was nothing there. Nothing. Yet he insisted he had seen the imprint of dozens of bare feet, trailing toward the cabin and then vanishing into the night. Objects began to move on their own. A pot of water spilled over a fire, its contents steaming as if disturbed by a hand. A small wooden box, placed carefully on a table, appeared in a different spot hours later. The men tried to rationalize it. Wind, uneven ground, tired eyes playing tricks. But each rational explanation fell short, each occurrence more deliberate than the last. A feeling of being manipulated, guided, herded, grew with every passing hour. It was as though the hollow itself was alive, aware, and intent on revealing something, piece by piece, on its own terms. And then the night sounds changed again. Whispers became breaths, breaths became distant moans, and shadows began to congregate just beyond the firelight. It was no longer curiosity or wonder that gripped the searchers. It was caution, fear, a recognition that they had intruded into a space that was not theirs to traverse. The logs in the fire sputtered, one fell with a crash, and in that moment they all saw it. A movement at the edge of the clearing, slow, deliberate, impossibly still. Figures, pale and indistinct, just beyond the glow, watching. Their presence alone froze the blood. And when a voice dared to speak, asking a question to the figures, there was no answer. Only the faint echo of something stirring, retreating into the hollows, waiting. By morning, those who survived the night spoke little. They could not explain fully what had occurred. Some claimed they had glimpsed faces in the windows of cabins long abandoned. Others said they felt the pull of unseen hands, guiding them away from the deeper hills. All agreed on one thing. Something in the hollow was patient, deliberate, and older than any living memory. They left the area, yet none would return. And the Hollow clan, vanished almost a century before, remained absent, leaving behind questions that still echo in the Ozarks to this day. Night had fully claimed the Hollow. The fire, once steady, now flickered as if reluctant to illuminate the clearing. The shadows beyond stretched farther than they should, twisting across the trunks of trees, pooling in corners that should have remained dark. The wind had ceased, and with its absence came a pressure, subtle but unrelenting, as if the very air had weight. The searchers, the living, the ones who dared remain, could feel it pressing against them, urging them forward, while simultaneously warning them away. It began with movement at the edges of the firelight. At first, nothing more than a shimmer, a suggestion of form. And then they saw them, figures standing between the trees. Not fully visible, not clearly human, but undeniably there. Pale faces, motionless, eyes reflecting the fire in ways that seemed to mock the light itself. One figure stepped forward, or perhaps it had always been moving. It was impossible to tell. The searchers held their breath, every instinct screaming to flee, yet some force rooted them to the ground, demanding that they look, that they witness. The figures were silent, yet their presence carried a weight that spoke louder than any words. One, smaller than the others, wore tattered clothing, reminiscent of what the children of the Hollow clan might have worn a century ago. The movement of its body, slight and deliberate, made it seem as though it were studying the living. Every step the searchers took was mirrored by the shadows beyond. Yet when they turned, nothing remained. Only the faint imprint of their forms in the soil, as though the earth itself had remembered them. Then came the sound. Not a scream, not a voice, but a vibration through the hollow that penetrated bone and mind alike. A soft, rhythmic hum, echoing faintly from somewhere beyond the tree line, rising and falling in a cadence that seemed almost unnatural, inhuman, yet familiar. The searchers recognized it, though they could not place why. A melody, half remembered, half imagined, as if the forest itself was singing an ancient lament. Eyes darted, hearts pounded, and still the figures remained just beyond reach, always retreating, always watching. A lantern was raised, shaking slightly in trembling hands. For a brief moment, the light caught the face of one figure, unmistakably human in form, yet the expression impossible to read. Hollow eyes, yet brimming with an emotion the searchers could not name. Before they could comprehend what they were seeing, the figure turned, vanishing into the fog, leaving behind the faintest trace of movement. A leaf shifting, a small stone rolling, a whisper of something brushing past the firelight. Then, within the clearing itself, the searchers noticed details they had not before. The carvings on the tree trunks, hundreds of them, twisted and worn by time, seemed to form patterns, repeating in ways that suggested intention. Faces, hands, symbols that mimicked life, yet could not belong to it. One searcher reached out to touch the bark, and the air shifted sharply, cold against the skin, as if the forest had drawn a breath. And then, all at once, the figures returned, standing closer now, surrounding the firelight in a perfect circle, yet impossibly silent, impossibly still. A sudden gust blew through the hollow, extinguishing the fire. Darkness fell, thick and suffocating. The figures did not vanish. They were everywhere, only perceptible as shadows dancing on the corners of the mind. The humming grew louder, now a chorus of echoes, rising to a crescendo that seemed to vibrate within the ground, the trees, the very bones of the searchers. One tried to speak, but the words failed. Another lifted a hand, trembling, and the shadows recoiled slightly, as if aware of being observed. Then silence. Complete, absolute, suffocating silence. And in that silence, the hollow seemed to exhale, and the living realized the truth. They were not intruding upon the forest. The forest, or whatever inhabited it, was letting them witness something not meant for human eyes. The shadows began to retreat slowly, step by step, melting back into the trees, leaving behind only the echo of movement, the faint hum, and a memory of faces that had been, and perhaps never were. The searchers, shaken, disoriented, dared not speak. They knew instinctively that any sound would shatter the fragile boundary. That curiosity alone had been enough to glimpse the impossible. When the first light of dawn finally filtered through the dense canopy, the figures were gone, leaving the hollow still, yet charged with the memory of what had occurred. A hollow that would never again be the same in the eyes of those who had seen it. With the first light of dawn, the hollow seemed almost peaceful, yet nothing about it was ordinary. The searchers had witnessed what they could not explain, and the memory of the figures lingered like smoke in their minds. But it was not enough. Answers were needed. The Hollow clan had vanished, and in the Ozarks, stories never die. They only wait, patient, for someone bold enough to seek them. The first step was the records. The county archives, a dimly lit room smelling of dust, mildew, and old ink, held fragments of the Hollow clan's life. Census records listed 12 names, adults and children, all bound by blood and proximity. They were farmers, loggers, and craftsmen, ordinary in every sense. And yet, in the margin of one ledger, a notation appeared: Hollow Creek, location uncertain, abandoned after fire 1921. That cryptic line, official and sterile, hinted at something beyond comprehension. It was as if even the bureaucracy recoiled from the truth. Newspaper archives revealed fragmented reports. One article mentioned the Hollow clan as a peculiar family, known for avoiding visitors and traveling lightly through the hills. Another piece, brief and almost apologetic in tone, described a local ranger expedition to investigate reports of missing livestock and the subsequent disappearance of the family. The accounts conflicted, details vanished between paragraphs, and the reporter's words hinted at unease rather than facts. The story ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as though even the editor had feared to finish it. Among these remnants was the journal of Sheriff Grant, the officer assigned to investigate the Hollow clan's disappearance. The journal entries grew progressively strange. At first, mundane. Notes about the terrain, the weather, the behavior of the family. But within weeks his handwriting became uneven, scrawled with phrases that blurred sanity and observation. "They do not leave," he wrote. "I hear them at night, though all are gone." Later entries spoke of symbols carved into trees, patterns in the dirt, and figures glimpsed in the fog. The last pages were indecipherable, smudged by water or tears, and ended with an abrupt note: "I cannot return. The Hollow is patient." The narrator, piecing together these accounts, returned to the Hollow under the pretense of daylight research. The cabins, long abandoned, were skeletal remnants of wood and stone, yet they contained fragments of domestic life. Dishes in cabinets, toys half buried in mud, a child's book lying open, pages soaked and curling. Each item was frozen in time, a snapshot of existence erased without explanation. The air carried a tension almost tangible, pressing against lungs and memory alike. One cabin in particular drew attention, the largest, built along the edge of a limestone bluff. Its roof sagged, the door hung unevenly, yet inside, the floor bore marks impossible to account for. Footprints appeared in patterns too deliberate to be random, too precise to be the work of animals. The narrator moved carefully, documenting each anomaly, each broken object. When he turned a corner, the faintest outline of a figure appeared in the corner of his eye, vanishing when confronted directly. He paused, recording the sensation in voiceover. Something watches, but not as a hunter. It observes, waits, remembers. The Hollow itself seemed to respond. A breeze would shift objects ever so slightly. Papers fluttered, dust displaced without reason. Lantern light revealed the carvings in the walls, symbols etched deeply, repeating in patterns that suggested intent. Faces, hands, and circular motifs that mirrored those described in Sheriff Grant's journal. Some were unmistakably human, others stretched and warped in ways the mind could not fully reconcile. The narrator noted the air grew colder in their presence, the sound of footsteps or shuffling shifting subtly with each turn, though the source remained unseen. The investigation led deeper into the landscape, a path descending beneath the bluff, narrowing into a shallow cave. Inside, the walls were lined with bones, not scattered, not haphazard, but arranged, deliberate. Circular patterns, arrangements suggesting ritual or record-keeping, as though the Hollow clan had catalogued existence itself, in life and in death. The narrator moved carefully, documenting each formation, aware of the oppressive weight of unseen observers. A faint hum, low and rhythmic, seemed to emanate from the stone itself, echoing with a resonance that vibrated in the chest. Nearby, a small underground pool reflected the dim lantern light. The narrator leaned over the water, documenting the reflection, and for a heartbeat saw another face behind his own, pale, indistinct, just above the surface. He spun quickly, lantern trembling, but no one was there. Only the pool remained, calm, unbroken, yet somehow charged with the memory of eyes that had watched across decades. The sound of dripping water became a rhythm, echoing footsteps that matched neither the narrator's pace nor the imagined presence of companions. It was impossible to distinguish what was memory, imagination, or something alive beneath the stone. Then came the discovery of a wax cylinder, labeled Clan Ceremony. When played, the audio was faint, distorted, yet unmistakable. A melodic chanting, unstructured but patterned, rose from the device, filling the hollow with tones that seemed to correspond with movements in the shadows. The narrator listened, documenting the sensation of disorientation, the creeping certainty that the Hollow clan had not simply vanished, but persisted in a form beyond conventional understanding. The voices rose and fell, merging with the sound of wind, the echoes in the limestone, creating an auditory tapestry that felt alive, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Every attempt to rationalize failed. The more the narrator observed, the more he realized the hollow was not merely a location. It was a presence. It was patience, calculation, and memory, manifesting in subtle ways that eluded direct detection. Shadows moved contrary to logic, objects shifted, echoes betrayed shapes that were not physically present. Every artifact, every carving, every sound seemed designed to draw attention to what remained unseen, to remind visitors that they were not alone, that the Hollow clan, or what remained of it, had endured. As daylight waned over the hollow, the narrator left the caves and cabins, carrying journals, recordings, and fragments of evidence. Yet, despite the clarity of some discoveries, the questions multiplied. How had the family vanished so completely? How had the forest, the caves, the land itself preserved their memory in these cryptic forms? And most pressing of all, what watched from beyond the shadows, beyond the reach of reason, waiting for the next to step too far into the hollow? The investigation ended not with answers, but with echoes. Those who dared to follow the Hollow clan's trail, left with notebooks full of observations, photographs of cabins collapsing into rot, sketches of carvings on trees and walls. But nothing explained their disappearance, and nothing explained the impressions left on the landscape, the whispers in the wind, the movement in the shadows that refused to obey the logic of the living world. Present-day researchers who have retraced these steps report the same sensations. The cabins may crumble, the forests may regrow, yet some presence lingers, a subtle vibration, a consciousness that watches, measures, remembers. It is in the rustle of the leaves when the wind is absent, in the distant echo of a child's laughter that dies before you can locate it, in the sense that every step taken within the hollow is being observed, recorded, catalogued. A modern investigator, armed with cameras and audio recorders, returned to Lost Hollow. The sun had barely risen, yet the fog already lay thick among the trees, curling around the bases of trunks, threading through broken fences, settling into the hollows left by the long-vanished cabins. As he stepped past the ridge, he noticed the same remnants described in the journals from a century before. Children's shoes, a broken chair, a spoon in the mud. He felt the weight of the forest, patient and deliberate. His recorder picked up sounds, faint at first, indistinguishable, but growing, forming patterns he could not interpret. The hairs on the back of his neck stood, and instinct whispered a warning he could not ignore. He descended into a small cave, walls streaked with mineral deposits and shadow. Bones, arranged in circles and patterns, stared back at him as they had stared at the previous explorers. The air felt cold, even in summer, carrying the faint, distorted echo of chanting. The wax cylinder lay in the corner, its label almost illegible. He placed it on the phonograph and pressed play. The sound that emerged was faint, warped, yet immediately recognizable. The melody was the same rhythm described in Sheriff Grant's journal, the same tone that had haunted searchers a century before. And as he listened, he felt it. A presence behind him, cold, patient, unblinking. When he turned, nothing was there, yet he was not alone. Later, back in the sunlight, the fog lingering at his heels, he spoke to locals. They looked away. Some claimed the hollow was cursed. Others insisted it simply remembered those who dared to enter. But all agreed, the Hollow clan had never truly left. It persisted in some form, interwoven with the land, the caves, the forests, the very memory of the hills. It had endured, patient, watching, waiting. And it would endure as long as someone remembered, or someone returned. The investigator returned home, recordings in hand, photographs, sketches, voice notes. Yet sleep eluded him. In the quiet hours of the night, he swore he heard faint humming, low and rhythmic, beneath the floors of his home. He turned, half expecting shadows to twist across the walls. He told himself it was fatigue. He told himself it was imagination. But the feeling persisted. Someone, something, remembered him. And when he awoke to the first light of morning, the sensation remained. Some things, once touched, cannot be forgotten. The Hollow waits still. Those who enter find themselves measured against time, against memory, against a presence that refuses to yield. No record explains it. No logic contains it. And for those who leave, the memory lingers like a shadow in the mind, a whisper in a fog that never lifts, a feeling that someone or something is always nearby, observing, patient, enduring. And now, as I speak to you from a distance of 100 years and more, the Hollow still exists. The cabins remain, the carvings persist, and if you were to stand at the edge of the forest, past the ridges, past the fog that curls through the trees, you might feel it, a presence, patient, watching. Perhaps you would hear the faintest hum in the distance. Perhaps you would glimpse a figure at the edge of the trees, motionless, staring. Perhaps the Hollow clan never left, and now you know where it is. If you stood at the edge of Lost Hollow right now, would you dare step inside? Step carefully if you ever visit the Ozarks, and if you dare to uncover more forgotten places and their secrets, subscribe now and join us in the shadows. This is the dark room of whispers,